All right, so a wild weekend just took place, and let's start with the Kansas City Chiefs going into Pittsburgh and taking care of business there to lead to now be 15-1 and lock up home field advantage in the AFC. And all season long, the story in Kansas City has been, well, they're winning, but they're not winning convincingly. And then they had what looked like one of the worst pass blocking offensive lines in the league. And then they make a couple switches, and now they've shored that up. In these last 2 weeks, they've beaten two really good teams, the Texans and the Pittsburgh Steelers. This last one in Pittsburgh convincingly. They've shored up their offensive line issues. Defense is still top shelf. Andy Reid's still one of, if not the best coach in the NFL. And then they've got clearly the number one quarterback going. So amazingly, here's a team that now has locked up home field advantage. They don't have to play anybody the last week of the season. They're going to get the bye coming up to start the playoffs. So for 3 weeks, they now get to rest up everybody and could enter the playoffs, health-wise anyway, as maybe the strongest team in the league. Yesterday in Tampa Bay, where Carolina just got pummeled, and I couldn't be happier for the Buccaneers and specifically Baker Mayfield. Because here's a guy who several years ago was drafted number 1 overall coming out of Oklahoma, who I didn't think his play would warrant that. And then his first few years, he kind of showed more, less flashes of brilliance, I'd say, and more consistent inconsistency. And then here he goes to Tampa Bay, and I'd say these last 3 years, he's looked amazing. And punctuated yesterday, he attempted 32 passes, and he had 5 incompletions and 5 touchdowns, and just looked great. And so here's Tampa now. They don't have the division locked up, but with a win at home next week against New Orleans, they will win the division. And so there's another hot team to look out for. The Cowboys go to Philadelphia, take on the Eagles. Jalen Hurts was hurt and didn't play. Kenny Pickett does play and plays very well. But he ends up getting knocked out, and Tanner McKee comes in and finishes the game. But the real story was Saquon Barkley, and in pursuit of the season's all-time single-season rushing record. He did get over 2,000 yesterday, and so now he's within 100 yards of breaking Eric Dickerson's all-time mark. So I think you'll see next week they play the Giants. I think that because this is a big part of NFL history, you'll see Saquon Barkley and the offensive starters at least play until he gets that record, and then you'll see them pull everybody out. They've won the division, and so you'll see them also get a bye that first week, and who knows what can happen from there. Philadelphia on both sides of the ball is just really, really good. The Packers take on the Vikings in Minnesota, and once again, the Vikings have just shown, specifically player-wise, Sam Darnold, what a season he has had. Was near flawless in the game. He threw for 377 yards. I think he completed 75% of his passes for 3 touchdowns. And once again, their coaching staff, starting with Kevin O'Connell at the top, and they find ways to do what all great coaches do, is they put their players both mentally and physically in positions to be successful and win football games. And at 14-2, the Vikings now have exceeded everybody's expectations. And last week of the season will come down to them in Detroit for the division. And then we've got why I'm actually here in San Francisco is to watch what has now turned out to be a meaningless game between the Lions and the 49ers. And I only say that because it doesn't matter who wins this game as far as who wins the NFC North Division and who gets the number 1 seed. Because win or lose, it all comes down to the Lions next week taking on the Vikings. And the winner of that game is the number 1 seed, wins the division. And the loser is the number 5 seed and plays a wild card playoff game. But looking at the Lions, they also are one of the most injured teams. And so I think Dan Campbell will take this opportunity to rest all the key starters. And I think this would be a great, because remember, Teddy Bridgewater was signed by the Lions to be the backup quarterback going into the playoffs. And since he's not played a snap this year, he's been rather coaching his former Florida high school team he played for into a state championship. This would be a great game for him to come in, get reps heading into the playoffs. And hopefully that will happen. I think that will happen tonight. And either way, I hope obviously the Lions get a win here in San Francisco, but I guess that's why they have to play the game.